Okay, well, thank you all for joining. My name is Bill Hartog, and I'm an infrastructure engineer here at Bytespeed. I back up quite a few of our salesmen, kind of behind the curtains on anything server or infrastructure related. So if you work with Tanner or Grant or Steve or Ken or Kevin, kind of the man behind the curtain there, helping those guys out. But I have a slide here at the end with my contact information. So if you guys ever need to get a hold of me for anything, even if you're outside the territory or whatever, definitely get a hold of me and I'll help you out. But this presentation here is all about Wi-Fi 6 and kind of a new add-on to that, the 6 gigahertz band that just opened up. So just here to answer some questions. We're not going to get anything real vendor specific or anything like that. Just kind of give everyone an idea of what changes are in Wi-Fi 6, why it's a bigger deal than some of the other generations in the past, and that type of thing. So they've started now redoing the way that they present the generations. Before it was always the letter. So, Gen 4, which they'll call Gen 4 now, was 802.11n. Gen 5, 802.11ac. And then the current generation, Gen 6, is the 802.11ax. So when you see 802.11ax or just ax, Gen 6, those are all interchangeable terms. They mean the same thing. There's no difference. I believe what has happened is now that we've got so many generations going on, people are getting confused with all the letters and stuff, especially with this current generation. This newest one is AX, and the previous one was AC. There's confusion and stuff, so they're starting to number them instead of go by the end of the number letters there. And by the way, if you guys do have any questions, just type it there in chat. I'll be happy to answer here at the end, and we can go through them. There's a Q&A section and a chat bar there. So if you have any questions during any of this, just go ahead and toss them in there, and we'll go through them at the end here. But as soon as they made this numbering system, of course, they threw a wrench in the deal and decided to do a Gen 6E. And that was kind of the FCC released the 6 gigahertz band for basically unlicensed radio, and Wi-Fi is kind of scooping that up. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end here too, but Gen 6E is not really out yet. There is no hardware that supports it currently. That is just a brand new thing that just popped up. So anything right now is going to be Gen 6, and then the kind of little addition to that will be Gen 6E coming up here in the future. New features in Wi-Fi 6. Some of these are very, very big. Some of them are, little additions and stuff like that. One of the biggest ones is going to be moving from OFDM to OFDM-A. It's basically, and we'll get into these a little bit more in detail here in the next few slides, but it's basically just the way things communicate, and things are broken up in the actual modulation of the frequency. We won't get too in depth, but it makes a big difference, especially on the 2.4 gigahertz band. There's so much noise and so much airtime congestion, so many things working on that 2.4 gigahertz band now. They've made some changes that will help actually, make that a little bit better, not so much airtime congestion, make the signal that they do have available operate more efficiently, that type of stuff. That's all what that's for. The MultiUser improvements, that's kind of a minor revision to what they already currently have. I believe right now the current AC does 8x downstream. It can support multi-user MIMO up to 8x downstream. They're adding upstream to that with this Gen 6 release. So now it's upstream and downstream, and of course that means more clients at a time, upstream and downstream. Power saving, they've put some new, and we'll talk about this in a future slide. They've put some new, especially for IoT. You got so many more things going on there. They're all low power. They sip on the power. A lot of them are battery powered and that type of stuff. So power is really becoming a bigger and bigger issue with some of that. So they've added in some things to how basically they sleep Wi-Fi devices, and those will we'll get into that here in a little bit. BSS Coloring is a really big differentiator in Wi-Fi 6. There's a lot of special sauce that kind of goes into the background of it, but it basically will really help on the 2.4 gigahertz band with airtime congestion, and I'll have actually a good picture of that coming up here. Outdoor Wi-Fi improvements, most ratifications of the Wi-Fi standards, they don't do a whole lot as far as improvements to actually, focusing on outdoor deployments and that type of stuff. Most of it is indoor based. They have done a few improvements to the outdoor implementations here. We'll talk about that here in the coming slides. And then QAM improvements is basically just throughput, just different algorithm that it uses to be able to push more data faster. That's basically just a little increase that they've done. It does actually make a little bit of throughput difference. So we'll get into that here in the next two slides. So again, one of the biggest changes is OFDM versus OFDMA. It basically comes down to client contention versus AP scheduled. So right now in AC and N, in every previous generation, it's all been client contention based. So a client will check the frequency to see if it's open. If it is, it will start transmitting. If it's not, it will kick off a timer and check again until it basically has a free chance to talk. That is how all wireless, at least Wi-Fi wireless at this point, has operated, where it checks the line. OFDMA is not a new technology. It's actually been used quite a bit. That's how cell towers can support so many phones and so many users all at the same time. OFDMA is a big reason for that. So they are introducing that now into Wi-Fi, and it's basically, instead of kind of the wild, wild west where all the clients are, contending for that airspace and they're all pushing off timers and doing all that type of stuff in the background to try to get that free airspace. Now the AP is kind of stepping in and trying to be a sheriff and telling everyone, listen, here's where you will talk. I will listen to you at that point, and scheduling the communication out a lot more than it has been in the past. Part of that is, you can see kind of in the graphical there, the frequency that you're operating at. Let's say you're operating at, channel 1 in the 2.4 gigahertz band. There are sub frequencies under that channel 1 that those APs and that those clients will operate. And the old way, one user would take up an entire section of that subcarrier. And in this example, there's 4 subcarriers, and each user is using up each subcarrier fully. Now you look at OFDMA, and the AP is actually able to break up those far more efficiently, and will actually assign them based on the data that the client is requesting. Like someone requesting an IM chat, that's the kind of data that's flowing through. The AP will give them a tiny little bit of data because that's all they need for that chat to come through. Whereas, someone else requesting a bigger file will get a much bigger chunk of that. So it tries to schedule and make it as efficient as possible as going through. And if you want to know what OFDM stands for, I got it on the bottom there, the orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. And then the OFDMA is basically the same thing, except for instead of multiplexing at the end, it's multi-access, multi-user access. So very similar things, but OFDMA is a lot more efficient. And then in the second slide here, you can definitely see it. One of the things it's also able to do on the left-hand picture there is, you can see the 802.11, the previous generations had far fewer subcarriers than the newer generation, than AX. So, like I say, like the example I used before, channel 1, it has, under AC, it might have, 8 or 10 subcarriers, whereas in AX, it has, twice or more than that. And the AP can use those much more efficiently, as you can see in the right-hand picture there. Even if user A, for example, here is only requesting a text file or an IM or something like that, it's going to use up that entire subcarrier to get that to them. Now with DFMA, those subcarriers are much smaller, and so you can carry smaller data. And if you do want smaller data, like an IM chat, like let's say user C in this case, that's all he's getting is an IM chat or something like that. It'll only give a tiny little subsection of the subcarrier band out to that user, and then the rest of them can be used for other users. So it's just a lot more efficient on the way it handles data in the same amount of time and in the same amount of space. The next change is an update to the MultiUser MIMO. Like I said before, it is up to 8 downlink and uplink streams. The big caveat to this is, of course, the client users. They have to be able to support the same standard that the AP is. So, and this is what you see if you've ever seen specs on an AP. It'll say it's a 4x4 radio, and then it'll have a colon, and it'll say 4 streams. This is what they're talking about. So AC currently, like I said, that standard actually supports up to 8 downlink streams at a time. Most clients will not support 8. I think the most is 4. Normally it's 2, sometimes 1 on the cheaper models and stuff like that. So this have to ties into, you have to make sure your clients are up to speed and stuff like that. So OFDMA is kind of the bigger piece of the puzzle, because anything AX is going to be able to support the way that works. This is kind of an add-on thing. It's nice to have, but like I say, a lot of clients won't support this fully. Onto the power saving improvements. So like I say, with the IoT and all those things going on, they've really started to focus on battery life, on laptops and that type of stuff. That's been a big, big push. So instead of a device constantly checking in for every set amount of time, so a device will go to sleep, and the wireless right now will check in every, a time interval that it kicks off. It will check in every once in a while with the AP and say, hey, I'm still here. Do you have everything or anything for me? Now it's more, again, the AP is kind of taking more of a central role here, and the AP is scheduling with the device how long it's going to sleep. And of course, if the AP receives anything for it, it'll also reach out and say, hey, I got something for you. But before a wireless device goes to sleep, it will check in with the AP. They'll schedule a time to say, okay, you're going to be asleep this long, and I won't mess with you unless there's something important that you need to know, and it will go to sleep. And then it'll wake up at that time, check in, and if nothing's going on, they'll reschedule another sleep time. So instead of, like I say, a client-based scenario where the clients are just kind of deciding when they go to sleep and when they're checking in with the AP and all that type of stuff, it is becoming more centralized. The AP is a lot more involved in how that type of stuff goes. And a lot of that boils down to the APs nowadays are just have a lot more processing power and that type of stuff than they did, when Wi-Fi was first imagined and first created and all that type of stuff. So good for, IoT, laptops and that type of stuff, less power draw and that type of stuff. So that is a good innovation there. And this is a really big one. BSS coloring, especially in the 2.4 gigahertz band. So with the current way things are done is going to be the OBSS overlapping. I have a call coming in. We're going to silence that. There we go. Okay, so the BSS coloring, the old way to do it is the OBSS overlapping basic service set. So you can see there you have user 1 that's connected to AP1. You have user 2 that actually has the option of connecting into AP1 or AP2. And then you have user 3 connecting into AP2. So if user 2 is connected into AP1 right now, like I was talking about before with that, the OFDMA where it had to wait for the line to be free, what this type of thing does is, since AP1 and AP2 are operating, in this case, they're operating on a frequency that's either the same, so the same channel, or a channel that overlaps. Let's say channel 1 and channel 3, there is overlap there. So user 2, when he's talking to AP1, not only has to wait for everything in that AP1 circle to be not talking, it also has to wait for AP2 to be done talking, because it can see AP2 and can hear AP2's circle. So in a school scenario, let's say, if you deploy your APs in every other classroom, well, you got that middle classroom in the middle of those two APs. those users can probably see both APs. So at that point, if there is overlapping channels there, they have to wait until everything is clear from AP1 and everything is clear from AP2 to talk to whatever AP they're connected to. If they're talking to AP1, like I say, they still have to wait till AP2 has cleared that radio frequency so it can communicate. What BSS Coloring does is it adds an additional layer of identification to the APs, and it allows the user to totally ignore AP2. So if you're looking down in the lower right-hand picture there, or the little diagram, you can see that AP2 is colored differently than AP1. What that means is user 2, when it's talking to AP1, can totally ignore AP2 and doesn't have to wait for AP2 to be done talking. This feature has a lot of magic sauce kind of in the background. It's not quite fully developed yet by the hardware manufacturers, so your vendors and stuff like that. Most of them don't have this fully implemented yet. This is a firmware update that will be coming out. So this is a kind of a future update right now, but it will be included in all the AX. It is part of the AX standard, and they are currently working on getting this pushed out. Again, really, really useful in the 2.4 gigahertz band, still useful in 5, but since you don't have near as much channel overlap and everything like that, 2.4 is where this type of thing really, really shines. Okay, and then like I said before, some outdoor improvements. They've never really focused on outdoor improvements before with any of the releases or anything like that. It's always been indoor deployments and that type of stuff. So what they've done is they've implemented some things in the AX Generation 6 that kind of help outdoor deployments a little bit. Just from reading the specs and reading what they've done, it sounds like they've seen some problems where there's a little bit more latency in those outdoor deployments. You have a little bit longer to go. So even if the data got to the endpoint intact and it was fine, it would actually be outside the timer that they had set to set up that communication. So yeah, the endpoint might have received it, but it received it a millisecond late, and so what it would do is just drop it because I got it, but I got it late, so just resend it because that's not valid. So what they're doing now is they're changing those timeouts around, making it so it's not going to constantly resending data and that type of stuff. So your throughput and your connections and that type of stuff for outdoor deployments should be improved. That's a lot for like the point to multi-point, point to point, that type of stuff. A lot more actually now that the epidemic has happened here and all that type of stuff. We've seen a lot more people going for these outdoor deployments and outdoor APs and that type of stuff. So AX is definitely going to improve those environments. Like I say, they have actually put some time into developing specifically for outdoor. And then the QAM change. The QAM is basically just a higher frequency modulation, and because of that higher frequency modulation, you get increased throughput. It has to do with some algorithms and stuff they use on those. Again, a lot of special sauce that goes in behind there, but the whole thing is, well, look, we have 4 times you go from 256 to 1024. There's definitely a large increase a throughput increase that you can jam into there. So that's what QAM is. These two are more, I would say, not a revolutionary fix. It's more like an evolutionary thing. The BSS Coloring and the OFDM are basically revolutionary changes that they've added in that are big for Wi-Fi 6 and all Wi-Fi going forward. The last thing I really want to touch on before we get to questions, and like I say, if you guys have any questions on any of this, definitely put it in chat or the Q&A section there and I'll get to them. But the last thing I really want to touch on, and this is brand new, it just came out. So any Generation 6 APs that you guys are currently looking at purchasing, have already purchased or anything like that, will not support the 6 gigahertz band. It requires a separate physical radio, so there will be a separate radio installed into some APs when they come out to support this 6 gigahertz band. You can't do it via firmware update or anything like that. So the newer ones that come out in the future will actually be, instead of like they say dual band now, the ones that support 6 gigahertz will be tri-band. It'll be 2.4, 5, and 6. So that'll be a separate radio they add in, possibly, if you have external antennas or anything, you'll have to add in a whole bunch of other antennas to support this 6 gigahertz band. But anyway, what has happened is on April 23rd, the FCC officially opened up the 6 gigahertz band to the Wi-Fi standard. So now 6 gigahertz has opened up. It's technically 5.25 or 5.925 gigahertz to 7.125 gigahertz. So there's a large space there, 59 new channels. And like I say, new radios are required. So the huge benefit we're going to get out of this right away is when you move to this, and it will take a few years to get in. Again, the APs will probably be coming out end of this year that will support this, but the clients also need to have a radio in order to support this. So you're not going to see mid to low end clients have this for probably another couple years. High-end devices, you might start seeing it, next year and that type of stuff, or even the end of this year when the APs start coming out. But this will be, take a while to implement because it does require physical changes and that type of stuff. But once the clients are on it, once the APs and stuff support it, the good thing about this is it's going to be an entirely clear band. You don't have any legacy devices on it at all. It is entirely free of interference, noise, and that type of stuff. So at least for this first generation of it, this generation 6E that they're calling it with the 6 gigahertz, it's going to be an entirely open band. You're not going to have anything old on it. Everything on it's going to use that OFDMA. It's going to have all the Wi-Fi 6 features and that type of stuff, so you don't have any of those older clients causing problems on the network like you do some of the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. Just a quick little picture on there about and you can see the channel sizes there. So like a 2.4 gigahertz channel is usually 20 megahertz. A 5 gigahertz channel is 80. It's technically 80. They really don't recommend. Usually they're like 40. And then 6 gigahertz can all go all the way up to 160 megahertz channel. So big wide channels if you want them, and they have the throughput and the range and the latency there too. So a massive improvement in throughput. You're going to be getting a lot more data going through there. Tying with that, it's a push that we're already seeing right now. If you guys are looking at, upgrading to especially the 6 gigahertz band in the future and that type of stuff, you're probably going to want to start looking at multi-gig switching and that type of stuff, because once you start getting into this 6 gigahertz band, it's going to have enough that you might actually be able to saturate a 1 gig wired connection. So that is something to think about, not only for the Wi-Fi portion too, but the switching portion. Now that this new band is out and it's so much faster, there might be a need for increased speed on your switching and that type of stuff. But you can see the range. It is slightly less than the 5 gigahertz. Of course, it's less than the 2.4. It's just like your bass versus your treble, right? So the 2.4 you can consider as your bass waveform. You can hear bass through walls, and it tends to travel a lot farther. Like a big booming voice will travel a lot farther than a high voice. So your 2.4 will travel farther, travel through obstacles better than your 5 gigahertz or your 6. 5 gigahertz, of course, has less than 2.4, and 6 gigahertz has a little bit less than 5. So your range isn't going to be quite as good. You'll probably have to put in some more density and that type of stuff if you really want really good coverage on your 6 gigahertz. Oh, excuse me, your 6 gigahertz. So it is something to think about when you're planning and designing and all that type of stuff. And then the latency is also a big one. It's just 2.4 crazy high, 5 gigahertz is a huge improvement, and 6 gigahertz is another large improvement over that. So just the general communication, how fast things are happening on the network, definitely faster. And that is because, everything is operating at a higher frequency. You have more subcarriers and all that type of stuff. And the band is just wider as well. So it allows more subcarriers inside those bands. The latency is greatly reduced. Well, that's about it. Like I say, if you guys have any questions on the Wi-Fi 6 or anything like that, definitely reach out to me. My email address is there. I am a certified wireless network administrator. So if you ever want to reach out and you have any networking questions, especially on the pre-sales or design or anything like that, I can definitely help there. If you have questions on even some configurations and stuff like that, I can definitely point you to where, you need to be in that type of stuff. So we just like to be a resource here and try and help out. But if you guys have any questions, I would love to take them right now. So if you have any questions, type them in chat, type them in the Q&A section. And other than that, I think we're done. And thank you for stopping by. And hopefully, I know it was pretty short, but hopefully kind of got a good idea there of Wi-Fi 6 and what's going on. All right, I'll keep it open for a couple more minutes in case a few questions trickle in, but if you guys want to leave, feel free.